What if the woman pouring your coffee at a roadside diner held the answer to a $500 million disaster? What if brilliance wore an apron and fate walked in tired and desperate? This isn't a story about luck. It's about choices. It's about hidden genius, and how one overlooked young woman stunned the world in seconds. Ashwood, Tennessee, wasn't the kind of town you circled on a map. It was the kind of place you passed through, blinked, and missed entirely. A few rusted gas stations, a shuttered movie theater, and a diner with flickering neon were all it had left to offer the modern world. But inside that forgotten diner, under tired lights and a sighing jukebox, worked Emma Carter, 25 years old. Unknown to the world, and quietly brilliant. Emma wore her brown curls tied back with a pencil when her hair tie snapped. Her uniform was too big at the sleeves, and her sneakers were worn thin from double shifts. No one asked where she came from. Most people just saw the name tag and the smile. But behind Emma's soft voice and tired eyes was a mind sharper than anyone could imagine. When customers were few and hours dragged on, she'd scribble algorithm puzzles on napkins or debug open-source code on a battered second-hand phone. She didn't just solve problems, she saw patterns in the chaos. She was self-taught to coding, prodigy, and no one knew. Not since her world collapsed 3 years ago. Emma had once been accepted into MIT, full scholarship, glowing recommendation letters, and a future most only dreamed of. But just months before leaving, her father suffered a massive stroke. He'd been her only parent, her compass, her supporter. With hospital bills mounting and no extended family, Emma gave up her dream overnight and returned to Ashwood to care for him. She stacked plates and poured coffee. Days bled into nights, but she never stopped learning. She downloaded textbooks on borrowed Wi-Fi. She watched MIT lectures while others watched sitcoms. Her dream hadn't died. It had gone underground. And it was about to rise. It was past midnight when the bell above the door gave a half-hearted jingle. The only customer at that hour was usually old Mr. Hendricks, who nursed cherry pie like it was sacred. But tonight, someone different stepped in, tall, composed, yet visibly frayed at the edges. His navy blue suit was sharp but travel-wrinkled. His tie was askew, and his expression looked like someone on the brink of unraveling. Emma noticed him. Immediately. Everyone would. He walked in with purpose and desperation, a strange mix. Sat at the corner booth. No small talk, just a muttered coffee. Black. Sure thing, she said, keeping her tone warm. But as she turned to pour the coffee, she glimpsed his tablet. Lines of code flashed on the screen, but not just any code. Complex systems-level architecture. Something about it made her freeze. She didn't mean to stare, but she recognized the structure instantly. Blockchain logic, transaction protocol. Something was wrong. He noticed her gaze but didn't speak. What is it? He asked after a moment. Something wrong. Emma hesitated, then said the words she never expected to say to a stranger in a $4,000 suit. You've got a recursive loop where there should be a transaction validator, and it's causing a collision between the node states. That's why the timestamps are failing to sync. The man blinked. He hadn't shown the screen long enough for anyone to catch that. Not unless. Excuse me, he said, leaning in, suspicious now. Emma blushed, suddenly aware of how absurd it sounded. Sorry, I just noticed. I do a bit of programming on the side, just a hobby. He stared at her, really stared, not like a customer, but like a man whose world had been unraveling, who might have just heard a lifeline. You're telling me? You saw that from 5 seconds of code on my screen. Emma shrugged awkwardly. It stood out. He opened the tablet, turned it toward her. Show me. His name was Liam Renshaw, the founder and CEO of NovaQuant, one of the most influential tech firms in the blockchain industry. His company was on the brink of finalizing a $500 million international contract involving a revolutionary payment infrastructure. But the final stress test had failed, miserably. A hidden bug in the core system caused unpredictable transactional failures. Their best engineers, PhDs from Stanford, MIT, and Tokyo Tech, had been on it for days. Every hour was costing them millions in potential damage. And here, in a half-lit diner, a waitress just spotted the root cause in seconds. Liam didn't speak for nearly a full minute. Then, would you mind taking a closer look? Emma's hands trembled slightly as she wiped them on her apron. Sure, she said. She slid into the booth beside him. completely unaware that her life was about to shift forever. Over the next hour, Emma dissected the code with a calm confidence. That stunned Liam. She not only found the original bug, but identified 3 additional logic gaps that the team had overlooked, all in under an hour. "This can't be real," he muttered under his breath. Emma smiled. "Sometimes you just need a fresh pair of eyes and a lot of sleepless nights." By the time the clock hit 2 a.m., Liam had sent an encrypted copy of the patch to his team. His phone began lighting up minutes later. They'd fixed it. It worked. The bug was gone. The system stabilized. The $500 million deal was back on track, but Liam wasn't thinking about the money. He was looking at Emma. Who was this woman? What was she doing hiding behind a coffee pot in a town the world forgot? Liam closed his tablet. For a moment, silence hung between them. "Emma," he said carefully, "how would you like to work for Nova?" She blinked. "You mean remotely?" "No, I mean, how would you like a full-time position, housing included, and full education benefits? Any program, any university, MIT, Stanford, your pick. I'll sponsor it." She stared at him like he was from another planet. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I do," Liam said. "You're exactly the kind of mind the world needs. You shouldn't be stuck here pouring coffee. You should be building the future." For the first time in years, tears gathered behind Emma's eyes. I have to take care of my dad," Liam nodded. "Then we'll relocate him we'll cover his care." "Why are you doing this?" "Because brilliance doesn't ask to be found. But when it appears, if we're lucky, we get one chance to do the right thing." Emma didn't sleep that night. The next morning, as the sun broke over the distant hills of Ashwood, she walked into the diner for her final shift, a job she had taken out of duty, a town that had become her cage, and a life she had nearly accepted as permanent. But something had changed. The world had finally seen her, and this was only the beginning. The plane touched down with a soft bump on the tarmac at San Francisco International Airport. Morning light poured through the windows, casting long streaks of gold across Emma's lap. She hadn't slept, not through the flight, not in the luxury SUV that met them at the Ashwood diner, not when she kissed her father's forehead before they left the house she grew up in behind. Her mind had been too full of disbelief, of fear, of hope that felt too sharp, too sudden. Now here she was, walking into a life she once believed had closed its doors for good. She stepped off the jet bridge into a sea of strangers in suits, the buzz of a city that never slowed down pulsing through her skin. Just 48 hours ago, she was cleaning tables under flickering lights. Now, she was heading to NovaQuant's global headquarters, an entire glass building in Palo Alto that looked like something out of a movie. Liam Renshaw had sent a full team to assist with her transition. Legal, HR, relocation specialists, a quiet woman named Tessa who coordinated her father's in-home care before they even left Ashwood. Emma had protested, worried it was too much, too fast. Liam had simply said, "You gave us back $500 million. I think this is the least we can do." But deep down, she knew he was doing it, not out of gratitude, but belief. He believed in her, and that terrified her more than anything else. As the sleek black car pulled through NovaQuant's gates, Emma's breath caught. The building curved like a sail caught in permanent wind, all glass and steel, clean and modern and alive. The entrance spun open automatically, the lobby humming with voices and screens and movement. A massive digital globe rotated above the reception desk, displaying real-time blockchain transactions around the world. People walked with urgency and purpose, suits, laptops, coffee cups. No one looked back. No one slowed down. It was a machine, humming with energy. And now she was inside it. Liam met her in the lobby. His suit was less crisp today, more lived in, his expression easier. "You made it," he said with a rare softness. Emma gave a small smile. "Still feels like I'm dreaming." "If you are," he said, "don't wake up." He guided her through the building, introducing her to team leads, executives, engineers, names she had read about in tech journals, shook her hand like she belonged there. Every step made her feel both taller and smaller. It was exhilarating and overwhelming. By afternoon, she was assigned to a corner workspace beside a panoramic window that overlooked Silicon Valley. Her name, Emma Carter, glowed gently on a plaque that hadn't existed yesterday, Below it, independent systems analyst, special projects. She didn't fully understand what that meant yet, but she knew one thing. This was no internship. It wasn't a sympathy offer. They expected her to contribute, and she intended to. Her first assignment came that evening, a sandbox version of a security protocol that had baffled the team for weeks. It was elegant, but flawed, the type of problem that made her itch with curiosity. She stayed long after most had gone home, her fingers moving fast, mind in rhythm with the logic. By midnight, she'd written a clean solution and annotated every line with explanations for the next dev who'd review it. She didn't leave the office. She dozed briefly on a couch near the coffee station, not out of obligation but joy. This was what her brain was made for. And yet, as sunrise tinted the skyline, a quiet voice lingered in the back of her mind out. Not everyone in the building welcomed her the way Liam did. In fact, some watched her with narrowed eyes, like shadows that didn't speak, but lingered. One of them was Cal Hartley, NovaQuant's VP of Technology, polished, experienced, and silently irritated from the moment he heard Emma's name. He didn't hide it well during the introductions. His handshake was limp, his smile thin. "This is the waitress," he'd said, too dry to be a joke. Liam ignored the comment. Emma had smiled politely, but she'd felt it dismissal, dressed in formality. Cal had spent 20 years in tech, climbing every rung with calculated steps. Now a young woman with no formal degree, no resume, no connections, had walked in and solved what his top team couldn't, and it made something in him quietly crack. Emma noticed. She always noticed, but she said nothing. She let her work speak. For the next few weeks, Emma's contributions turned heads. Her code was clean, her logic fast, her insight rare. She built not just answers but systems, ways to solve problems faster, smarter, safer. She didn't show off. She didn't grandstand. She simply delivered. And with every success, more eyes turned toward her, some with admiration, some with disbelief, and some, like Cal's, with quiet resentment. He began pushing back, assigning her projects without notice, calling last-minute meetings, dismissing her feedback with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Emma tried to ignore it. She had faced bigger storms. She had carried more weight. But there was something unsettling about fighting a war that no one acknowledged was happening. Then came the meeting, a high-stakes contract with the European Monetary Alliance. NovaQuant had built a prototype platform to stabilize cryptocurrency conversions using AI-driven regulation forecasting. It was ambitious, complex, and failing. A critical forecasting module was generating wild, unpredictable swings. The European team was threatening to walk away. Liam called an emergency review session. Cal led the meeting. His team presented a dozen excuses: global data volatility, API integration issues, forecasting lag. But Emma, seated silently at the corner, watched the entire code structure unfold on the projector and saw it. The problem wasn't volatility. It was feedback looping between the simulation parameters, a flaw in the initial assumption. She raised her hand. "Actually, I think I see what's wrong," she said. "It's in the variable dependency weights. The system is learning from its own adjusted output, not from live data input. That's why it's compounding the errors." Silence. Then, murmurs. Liam turned to her. "Show us." Emma stood, walked to the tablet, and with calm clarity explained the issue. 3 minutes. That's all it took. The room changed. People leaned in. Even Cal went quiet, his jaw tight. And when she finished, Liam didn't speak right away. He just nodded slowly. "That's it," he said. "That's the root." Applause followed, except from one corner. Cal's eyes, behind the polite smile, burned with something darker. Emma returned to her seat, her heart racing. She wasn't chasing attention, but truth had a way of drawing it anyway. Later that night, Liam pulled her aside. "You saved that meeting," he said. "Again, I just saw it," she replied. He paused. "How are you holding up?" "Really?" Emma hesitated. "It's a lot, but I'm grateful." "You're not just talented, Emma," Liam said. "You're necessary. The world doesn't know it yet, but it will." Those words echoed in her mind long after she left the office, but so did another feeling that something was shifting beneath the surface. Something quiet, watching, waiting, and it wasn't finished with her yet. The rain started just as Emma stepped outside the glass tower of NovaQuant. It was a soft drizzle at first, more mist than storm, the kind that whispered across the skin rather than soaked through. She didn't pull up her hood. She liked the rain, liked how it blurred the city lights into soft halos, made the noise feel distant, like the world was thinking. Inside her head, though, it wasn't quiet. She kept replaying the meeting from that afternoon, the way people had looked at her, the way Cal hadn't looked at her at all. Not after she exposed the flaw his team missed, not after she saved the European deal. It should have felt like a win, but it didn't. Not entirely, because there's a strange kind of loneliness in being the only one who sees what others contend, knowing that some would rather ignore the truth than admit they were wrong. Emma was used to being underestimated, but she hadn't expected pushback from people who were supposed to be allies. Her phone buzzed. A message from her dad's nurse. Just an update. His appetite was improving, his strength returning a little each day. That brought a small smile to her lips. She'd made the right choice. This job, this leap, had already begun to make a difference in the life that mattered most to her. But the deeper she got into NovaQuant, the more she sensed something else under the surface. In her first weeks, she'd been given high-level sandbox projects, hypothetical scenarios, tasks that kept her in the corner. But after that meeting, after she solved the real problem, the assignments shifted, subtly, quietly. Suddenly, she was being looped into earlier-stage design meetings, given read-only access to systems she hadn't even known existed. She noticed code names in file directories: Argus, Titan's Veil, Helix Depth, and none of them were public-facing. They weren't blockchain applications, they weren't financial tools, they were something else, something bigger, and she wasn't supposed to see them. At first, Emma assumed it was an error, a permissions glitch. Then she realized someone was leaving a trail for her. Small fragments of uncommented code, unsecured test environments, encrypted notes with simple patterns that only a very specific type of mind could recognize. It wasn't Cal. He would never risk exposure. He was too careful. But someone wanted her to find these things. Someone knew she'd follow the threads, and she did. Late nights became earlier mornings. She slept less, thought more. Her mind wasn't just working through puzzles, it was chasing a shadow. That's when she found it, buried inside an old version of a system labeled Helix Depth. She discovered a dormant AI module, not documented, not acknowledged in any of the architecture summaries. It wasn't for payments, or automation, or optimization. It was predictive, but not like the kind she'd studied. This one didn't forecast markets or weather, or supply chains. It forecast people, behavior, decisions, beliefs, and based on its access logs. It had already been deployed months ago. Emma sat frozen at her terminal, her fingers hovering above the keys. The room was empty, the city outside glittering like a net of secrets. She scrolled through logs and put streams pulled from social networks, financial data, biometric readings, then output reports tagged by name, real names. Her name. Her father's, Liam S. and Cal's. It wasn't just code, it was surveillance, decision mapping. Prediction, scoring. Emma's chest tightened. It wasn't just invasive, it was unethical, dangerous. A tool that could shape markets, elections, public perception, all by knowing what people would do before they even did it. She backed out of the system and locked her screen. Someone had built a machine that understood the human mind better than most humans, and it had been trained in secret. The next day, Emma confronted Liam. She didn't accuse, just asked, calmly, carefully. His expression didn't shift, but his eyes did. For a brief second, something unreadable passed through them. "I wondered how long it would take you to find it," he said. That was all. No denial, no alarm, just confirmation. She didn't respond. Her silence was its own question. Liam folded his hands. "You're not wrong to be disturbed. Helix Depth is ... complicated. It started as a model to prevent misinformation spread during pandemics, but like all powerful tools, its scope grew faster than its limits." Emma didn't look away. "It's dangerous. So is fire," Liam said. "So is medicine. So is code in the wrong hands." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "What happens when the wrong person gets control of it?" Liam's reply was quiet. "That's why you're here." Emma blinked. "You think I can protect it?" she asked. "No," he said. "I think you can understand it better than anyone, and decide what should be done." A part of her wanted to walk away, to go back to her corner office, to the safe assignments and the quiet code. But another part, stronger, knew she couldn't unsee what she had seen. This wasn't about a career anymore. It was about responsibility and trust and truth. But she also knew something else now. Something deeper. Someone else inside NovaQuant didn't want her to know what Helix Depth was. Someone had built it in secret, hidden it, deployed it without oversight, and whoever they were, they had power. The kind of power that didn't like being questioned at night. Emma received an anonymous message in a private inbox she'd never shared. Just 4 words. You're getting too close. She stared at the screen. The game had changed, and she was no longer just a player. She was a threat. The knock at Emma's apartment door came at 2:13 a.m. 3 sharp raps, then silence. She froze mid-step in her kitchen, a mug of tea cooling in her hands. Her heartbeat quickened. Not from fear, at least not entirely, but from that prickling awareness that something had crossed a line. She wasn't imagining it anymore. The message, the silence from Liam, the glares from Cal, the system that shouldn't exist, something real was happening. She crossed the floor slowly, barefoot, quietly. The hallway outside was dim through the peephole. No one stood in view, but on the floor, a flash drive, unmarked. No note, no envelope, just there, placed deliberately, waiting. She didn't touch it, not yet. She slid it inside with the tip of a pencil and sealed it in a plastic bag before sitting down at her computer. If she was being watched, and she had no doubt she was now, she needed to be smart. She booted up a secured offline machine, one she'd built herself with no Wi-Fi chip, no microphone, no camera. The kind of setup most people didn't think to own, but she wasn't most people. She inserted the drive. A single file opened. Truth Before Silence, PDF. She clicked it, and the floodgates opened. It was a report, more than 200 pages long, redacted documents, internal communications, data tables, timestamps, maps, photos. It detailed the true development history of Helix Depth, but not as a mistake or a tool gone too far. It was a plan, a deliberate, multi-stage rollout of an AI-powered psychological influence platform, first for targeted advertising, then for voter sentiment control, then for legal case forecasting. It had already been tested in 3 countries under fake corporate subsidiaries. The outcomes had been frighteningly accurate. Even worse, it was profitable, and the person overseeing its expansion, not Liam, Kel Hartley. His name appeared again and again in the digital paper trail, under project aliases, in meeting logs, in private servers. His fingerprints were everywhere. Emma leaned back in her chair, breath shallow. It made sense now. The hostility, the sudden interest in her projects, the passive aggression. He hadn't just disliked her, he'd seen her as a risk, a threat, to a machine he believed no one could or should stop. But why hadn't Liam said anything? And who had given her this file? The next morning, she confronted Liam again. Not with accusations, just questions. She found him in his office, looking 10 years older than the week before. He listened in silence as she described the drive, the documents, the patterns. His hands folded, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he exhaled slowly. "I know," he said. The silence that followed felt like it echoed. "You knew?" Emma asked. He nodded once. "I found out months ago. Too late to stop the initial deployment. Too early to expose him without burning the company to the ground." "Then why?" "Because I needed someone who could do what I couldn't," he said. "I built this place. I built NovaQuant to stand for something. But somewhere along the line, I stopped seeing where the lines were blurring." Cal didn't. Emma stepped back. "So you brought me in to fix your mistake?" "No," Liam said. "I brought you in because you still see the world as it should be. Because you've never chased power, you chase truth. I thought maybe you could find what I couldn't." The words hit her harder than she expected, because deep down, she hadn't realized how much she needed someone to see her that way. But still, something didn't add up. "Then why not just expose him?" Liam hesitated. "Because he's not working alone," he said. "There are investors, politicians, people who see Helix Depth as a tool to shape the future, not corrupt it. And if I expose him without proof, they can't bury. He wins. They spin it. I vanish, you vanish. The story dies." Emma's mind raced. "Then what do we do?" Liam stood, walked to the window. The city glittered beneath grey morning clouds. "We build something stronger. We rewrite the system from the inside out. And when we're ready, we shine a light so bright they can't hide behind it." Emma shook her head. "That's not enough. We can't just wait. Liam turned. Then what do you suggest? She looked at him, voice steady. We fight back. Now. That night, she reached out to the only person who might be willing to help, without hesitation. Juno Park, her old professor from Ashwood Community College, a cybersecurity genius who had once walked away from a high-paying tech job when he found out the company was mining private user data without consent. He was the only one Emma had ever met who saw the world in code and conscience. She contacted him through an encrypted channel they'd used years ago to trade ideas, back when she was still learning, still hoping. To her surprise, he replied, "Within the hour, send what you have, meet tomorrow." The next 48 hours moved like a storm. Emma, Juno, and 2 trusted developers he brought in people who'd left the tech industry in protest began reviewing the Helix Depth framework. They created a mirrored sandbox, carefully replicating its behavior in a way that couldn't be traced back. What they found was worse than Emma had imagined. Helix Depth wasn't just predicting thoughts, it was learning how to influence them, testing responses to subtle variables in language, headlines, even color schemes in news feeds, and then modifying future inputs based on which outputs led to desired actions. It was not a tool, it was a weapon, designed to be invisible and effective. By the end of the 3rd day, Juno looked up from his screen, eyes bloodshot but burning with clarity. "This has to go public," he said. Emma nodded. "We'll need time and protection. You won't get it from inside NovaQuant," Juno replied. "But there are journalists who've been waiting for something like this. I know a few, ones who don't fold under pressure." Emma hesitated. She'd come so far, escaped poverty, found purpose, built a life out of sacrifice, and now she was risking it all. But she thought of her father, her younger self, every person who still believed technology should be used to lift people, not manipulate them. She looked at Juno. "Let's burn it down the right way." He smiled, and across town, in his high-rise corner office, Cal Hartley stared at his screen. He knew she had found the truth, and he was already planning his next move. The world kept moving as if nothing had changed. Cars hummed past coffee shops, subways rattled beneath sidewalks. People scrolled through their phones, liking pictures, reacting to headlines carefully chosen by invisible hands. And in the quiet corners of the internet, Helix Depth continued to run, still watching, still learning. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. Emma stood at the heart of it now, not just as a brilliant coder or the once-known waitress who caught a billionaire's attention, but as the person who held the match that could ignite everything. She hadn't slept in nearly 30 hours, not because she couldn't, but because the stakes had never felt more real. Across from her, Juno tapped through one of the mirrored simulations, his brow furrowed. "They're adjusting," he said quietly. "Whoever's running the live instance of Helix, they've detected something. They're muting the influence vectors, cloaking outbound signals. They're trying to make it disappear." Emma's fingers tightened around her mug. "Because they know we're close." Juno nodded. "Too close." That morning, they'd sent the first batch of documents cleaned, verified, time-stamped, to an independent journalist named Eliza Markham. Eliza had built a reputation for exposing tech scandals no one else dared touch. Her inbox had been flooded for years with leads, most of them dead ends or hoaxes. But this was undeniable. She'd called Emma almost immediately, not to ask if the files were real but to ask how fast they could go public. Emma had paused. "Not yet. There's more." And there was, because while Helix Depth had been designed to understand people, it was also leaving behind something the creators hadn't anticipated: patterns. The AI's influence outputs were traceable not individually, not easily but at scale. Emma realized they could build a diagnostic tool, a kind of ethical blacklight, something that revealed manipulation where it hid, a way to see what the AI didn't want anyone to see. They called it Project Lantern. It wasn't sleek, it wasn't polished, but it worked, and once deployed, it began to illuminate corners of the web that had long seemed random, organic, or just strange. Entire news cycles seeded by fabricated triggers, meme trends designed to soften political narratives, algorithm tweaks that quietly pushed divisive content to one region, but not another. Even financial micromoves, tiny trades made seconds before announcements showed signs of behavioral modeling. It was bigger than anyone had imagined, and now they had proof. But that meant they were running out of time. On the 4th night, just as the final report was being packaged for global release, Emma's secure laptop suddenly powered off, then back on. A single message blinked on a black screen. You were warned. Emma's pulse spiked. She pulled the battery, disconnected the hard line, and tossed the drive into the microwave, one of the few places it couldn't be tracked or remotely accessed. Juno, alarmed, asked, "What did it say?" She stared at the blank machine. "They know exactly where we are, and they were done sending warnings." An hour later, Liam called. His voice was calm. "To calm, they've frozen my accounts. Froze Nova Quants too. I'd been removed from the board." Emma closed her eyes. Cal, and whoever's backing him, I don't think he's the top anymore. He's just the most visible part of something much deeper. Emma could hear the weight in his voice, years of building something he thought would do good, only to realize it had been turned into a mask for something else. "I can still protect you," Liam said, "but you need to disappear for now." "No," Emma replied quietly. "I need to finish this." Liam didn't argue. He just said, "Then let me help you vanish after." By morning, Eliza had the final encrypted folder. She had everything she needed to blow the truth wide open. Timelines, source code, financial trails, AI logs, Project Lantern analysis, and proof that Helix depth had been used not only to sway behavior but to suppress truth. Before pressing send, Eliza asked Emma one final question. "Are you ready for the world to know your name?" Emma hesitated, because this wasn't about recognition, it was about risk. She could never go back to a quiet life. Not after this. Not after showing the world how easily free will could be engineered, without a single person realizing it. She thought about her father, about Liam, about every young coder like her, who thought they were just writing functions, not shaping futures. She whispered into the phone, "Let them know who broke the silence." And Eliza hit publish. The story exploded. Within hours, global networks picked it up. Social media went into meltdown. Hashtags trended. Government officials released statements. Stock markets trembled. Lawsuits were filed. Tech conferences were cancelled. Investigations opened across continents. But more than all of that, people began to ask questions. Who's guiding what we see? Who profits from what we believe? What does it really mean to think freely? And in the middle of it all, Emma disappeared. No press, no spotlight, just silence. Because she didn't need the credit, she just needed the world to wake up. And as night fell, again over the same city that once overlooked her, a quiet ripple moved through millions of minds, a flicker of awareness, a sense that maybe the truth hadn't been buried forever. The whispers started before the sunrise. Not in boardrooms, not on the news, but in group chats, late-night forums, campus lounges, living rooms, cafes, and quiet moments of sudden clarity, when people began asking, "What else don't we know?" Helix depth wasn't just a scandal anymore. It had become a mirror, a reflection of everything the world had ignored for too long. And now, the reflection couldn't be unseen. Emma was gone, or so the world believed. She'd walked away the morning after the release. Before the interviews, before the cameras could find her, with only a small backpack and a burner phone, she'd left behind her apartment, her name, and the girl who once poured coffee while solving billion-dollar puzzles on napkins. But disappearing wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning of a different kind of resistance, hidden deep in the rural edges of a mountain town, where no cell towers reached and the signal died on approach. Emma worked with a small group of trusted builders, coders, journalists, whistleblowers, and even a few ex-insiders who had reached out after the exposure. They called themselves the Echo Line. Not rebels, not hackers, just truth keepers, doing what institutions wouldn't. They didn't trust corporations to regulate themselves. They didn't trust governments to act fast enough, so they started building something the world couldn't silence. A decentralized, ethical framework, a real-time transparency grid, powered by millions of connected users, voluntarily sharing anonymous data about how their digital lives were shaped. Every algorithmic push, every strange ad, every recommended post, it all flowed into the Lantern network as citizen-led watchdog, seeded by Emma's original code. It spread faster than even Helix depth had. Within 6 weeks, over 5 million people had opted in. Within 2 months, tech companies scrambled to release new transparency tools, hoping to calm the wave. But it was too late. Trust had already shifted. For the first time in years, The public wasn't just consuming information, they were questioning how it reached them. Meanwhile, Cal Hartley wasn't untouched. His board ousted him quietly. But the world noticed. He denied the allegations, of course, framed himself as a misunderstood innovator whose vision had simply outpaced the public's readiness. But no amount of spin could bury the facts anymore. Leaks poured in. More files, more proof, names, backchannels, deals brokered in dark corners of the digital world, and with every new reveal, Project Lantern grew stronger. Emma stayed in the shadows, not because she feared the spotlight, but because she knew real change didn't need a face, it needed momentum. She watched her movement unfold through backdoor streams and encrypted channels, saw teens teaching others how to track manipulative patterns online, watched professors add her research into ethics curriculums, watched kids debug political content with the kind of clarity most adults missed. And then came the letter. It arrived the old-fashioned way. No email, no encryption, just a stamped envelope, hand-delivered to one of her quiet drop points. Inside, a single page. Thank you, you saved more than you know. L. Liam. His first message since everything fell apart. She smiled when she read it, not because it gave her closure, but because it reminded her. Some people do change. Some people do fight back. Later that month, a journalist tracked down an old man who once ran a diner in Ashwood. He told a quiet story about a young waitress who never belonged behind the counter, who scribbled notes between orders, who stared too long at broken machines as if she could fix them with her mind. Whatever happened to her? The reporter asked. The old man just shrugged. Last I heard, he said, she was fixing something a lot bigger than coffee machines. The story went viral, but her name was never found. Some said she was hiding. Others believed she was watching, waiting. But those who knew better, they didn't care if she ever came forward again, because what mattered wasn't who she was. It was what she started. And late one evening, in a small room lit by the soft hum of servers and lantern logos on flickering screens, Emma stood beside a chalkboard scrawled with new designs, new defenses, and new questions. Her voice was calm, focused. This isn't about stopping the storm, she said to her team. It's about teaching people how to build their own shelters on, how to see the clouds coming. Outside, the world was still chaotic, still uncertain, still loud, but for the first time in a long time, the truth wasn't buried in silence. It was rising slowly, steadily, without fear. And Emma Evans was still listening.